Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Dharma podcast. Entertainment plays a key role in everyone's life. It has its rightful place. An industry which was meant to entertain all of us, which is popularly known as Bollywood, in the guise or in the course of trying to entertain, has ended up being a tool for agendas being peddled, a tool for distorting history, and a tool for several other things. It's almost a cesspool now. So, in this conversation, which we aim to make a series with Sandeep, we will trace the journey of how the Indian film industry started to the current stage, and what is the impact it has had and how it has been used as a propaganda tool. So let's get started with Sandeep Balakrishnan. So Sandeep, like I said, we'd like your perspective on tracing the journey of Bollywood and its impact on generations of Indians, if I may call it that. So could we begin from the beginning, as the industry started? What was the form and shape then, and then we'll take it to what it is today over the course of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, the idea is to make this what is known as Bollywood into a series of free-flowing discussions, hopefully tracing the trajectory of Hindi cinema specifically. We're not talking about other film industries. Of course, they will all come in an incidental, in an ancillary sort of fashion as the series progresses. Uh, in fact, one of the reasons to begin this series on Bollywood is because I've received a lot of messages and comments on various other podcasts, other episodes on different topics, requesting me to speak on this. So that's also the other reason. So, in a way, we are deeply thankful to our subscribers and our audience for actually drawing our attention to Bollywood. So and there is no dearth of videos, there's no dearth of essays and even academic papers. Many years ago, an academic, I think from IIM Lucknow or IIM Ahmedabad, one of those places, he authored a very well researched paper tracing the bias, specifically the anti Hindu bias in Bollywood movies, in Hindi cinema throughout the decades. I think his starting point begins sometime in 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. So this research was conducted more than 10 or 12 years ago, or even earlier, if I'm not mistaken. So given all this, I think it is only in the fitness of things that we take our audience seriously and hopefully give a balanced as well as a nuanced perspective on the trajectory of Hindi cinema, also known as Bollywood. To begin at the beginning, uh, Bollywood has a history of nearly, Hindi cinema has a history of nearly a century. And it was an outgrowth. In many ways, it was an outgrowth of the vibrant and robust tradition of drama, not just Hindi drama, but across India. All Bharatiya Bhasha drama in stage performances in all languages of India. It still has a vibrant tradition. But before we get to that, here is the point: cinema as a medium, cinema as a new form of entertainment, like most technology, was is not homegrown. It was invented elsewhere. It was innovated. It was an invention of the West, primarily the United States, which took off in a different tangent and became a booming industry concentrated in a locality in California known as Hollywood. So that is the rough origins. And then when this new medium uh, came into India and we began to adapt to it as a medium, of course, you had projectors and you had reels and rest of the things in the early days. But where were the stories and what were the stories? Those stories essentially had to be drawn from our own repository of stories, of Puranas, of different aspects of our dramatic tradition. India is the world's greatest treasure trove of stories, be it Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, what are known as Kavyas. It could be Raghuvamsha's, Kalidasa's Raghuvamsha, Kumara Sambhava, great Bhavbhutis, Uttaramacharitra. So, I mean, the list is nearly endless. One life is not sufficient to cover the entire repository of stories and dramas and poems written in all Indian languages. One life is not sufficient. That is the amount of, wealth that we have. So you naturally fall back on this great literary and dramatic inheritance that your land has given you. Plus, like I said, you also had a vibrant tradition of theatre, drama. Traditional drama theatres uh, are quite different from the way they have evolved, from the way plays are enacted today. Today, meaning over the last 30 years at least. So, the form itself and the stage acoustics, the stage design, set design uh, in theatre has undergone a sea change. But in its early days, traditional theatre had certain conventions which I'm not going to get into because we are going to digress in a big way. So you already had an existing dramatic tradition which was more or less faithfully transported or exported into this new medium called cinema. So this is why the movies that were made in the first 2 or 3 decades since cinema was introduced in India were majorly based on Puranic themes. Satya Harischandra. That was one of the
Yeah.
earliest movies made in Hindi. And allegedly, it was very close to the heart of a great man named Mohandas Gandhi. There are multiple retellings, multiple renderings of Satya Harishchandra's story in all Indian cinema. It is one of the landmark movies in Kannada. But when it was made in Telugu, the same movie was, I think, shot simultaneously or around the same time. In Kannada, it was uh, the role was performed by Rajkumar, and in Telugu, it was by N.T. Ramarao. So in Telugu, Satya Harishchandra was a flop. So you see, coming back to Hindi cinema, Satya Harishchandra, that was one of the first movies, and it became a big success. And then you even had movies like Bhakta Prahalada being made in Hindi. Can you even imagine a Bhakta Prahalada being made today? Right? And then, of course, by the 60s, you had this, blockbuster hit called Jai Santoshi Ma. Jai Santoshi Ma is a deity that does not exist in our Puranic annals.
It does not.
It does not. That movie created Jai Santoshi Ma. All right, it's also still one of the landmark movies in Hindi cinema. Had a record run and things like that. So, from those beginnings in Hindi cinema, it was art. Movie was an art because drama is also an art in our tradition. And so, as well as in the Western tradition, they all belong to the category called art. Literature, poetry, novels, dramas. So all these come under the large umbrella called art. This art aspect was retained even in Hollywood all the way till the 70s or even the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So you had musicals like Sound of Music, classic example in Hollywood. So whereas the subgenre called musical in Western cinema, we have no such genre called a separate genre called musical in Indian cinema because music and dance
Are integral
are
to.
integral and they date back all the way to Bharata Muni's Natyashastra. So, a lot of these principles of Natyashastra were still employed and they are still employed to a largely diluted extent in the movies that are being made today. Song, dance, dramatic monologues, extended back and forth. This was part of our tradition. It was art, and the purpose of art, as Natyashastra itself says, is to primarily entertain. It is not to give a social message. It is not to change the society. It is not to deliver some justice. It is not to create a movement. It is entertainment, plain and simple. Entertainment in Sanskrit aesthetics, in Indian aesthetics, is known as Rasananda because throughout the duration of watching a movie or reading fiction or enjoying some poetry, throughout the duration you are transported in a different world. Your mundane world does not exist. So that world might be better or might not be better than your real world, but it exists. It is artificially created for a certain duration till that movie lasts. So entertainment is a primary purpose of all art. You see, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger, okay, lifting one entire truck and throwing it and doing all kinds of superhuman things. You know that is not real, but this is called willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
So you suspend your logical faculties, you suspend realism, and enter into this artificial world, which will give you enjoyment.
A distraction from your daily rigor.
Enjoyment. Don't
Yeah.
even call it distraction. It is enjoyment, pure and simple, because there are no strings attached to this enjoyment. No boss will ask you to submit a report. You won't lose any. You won't lose your house because you are enjoying a movie. No, nothing. None of the external factors that affect your so-called real life will be present there. So you are transported into that world. So from this definition, from this tradition of Rasananda or entertainment, it soon became something called an industry. So there is art and there is commerce, and there should be an ideal mix between art and commerce. So when something becomes an industry, the art portion, the ennobling portion of it, the enjoyment quotient of it will get diluted, and then it becomes everything else but art. So this is pretty much what has happened both in Hollywood and in Hindi cinema, primarily Hindi cinema, and it has passed through several well-defined phases. In hindsight, of course. So from these traditional themes, in fact, a great cinematic scriptwriter, director, and an art exponent, great craftsman. His name was Niranjan Pal. He is none other than the son of Bipan Chandra Pal. He eventually migrated to London, and then he did a lot of remarkable work in cinema and theatre out there in London. So one of the things that he mentions in a very long essay, a masterpiece in fact, and he wrote this essay in 1915, 1914 or 15, explaining the importance of this new medium called cinema as a vehicle of not just of enjoyment and entertainment, but cultural education. So it's a long essay. I've published it on Dharma Dispatch.
Okay.
You can read it. One of the main points that he mentions in his essay is how to use this new medium called cinema to showcase the best of Indian culture to the rest of the world. And guess what he mentions there? He highly recommends narrating stories, writing screenplays about the works of Kalidasa.
Well, that's what the
Yeah, Abhignana Shakuntalam, Kumara Sambhava, or even Mrichakatika. So all these great Sanskrit plays. So they showcase the best of our Indian culture, and those are the themes that he recommends. Filmmakers should touch upon. So from this stage onwards, for various reasons, Hindi cinema became concentrated in a place called Mumbai or Bombay instead of, say, somewhere in central India or even in North India. Hindi cinema became concentrated in Mumbai from the early days. Then, as it began to evolve, all kinds of people came into this industry: poets, drama script writers, lyric writers, music directors. This early evolution was once again shaped by the Natyashastra from the theatre tradition, like I said. Even in Hindi cinema, you look at all those old movies, you will clearly see an imprint there. Now, for example, in the 1960s, I'll take a random example. Dr. Kotnis in China, very big hit. It tells the story of a medical doctor who tends to the wounded soldiers in the 1962 war. Why do you need songs in such a movie?
You don't, obviously.
You don't, but there are songs in that. And it was an integral, inseparable part of our cinema. So this is how our movies, initial movies, Hindi cinema used to be made around the same time. That is starting sometime in the mid 30s. something else also happened. Many of these artists, writers, dialogue writers, they were drawn from something called the Indian Progressive Theatre Association, but that came much later. Now, these the communist movements was peaking around the 1930s. It had gathered tremendous stream. Communist ideology, every aspect of society is a vehicle for their communist propaganda. So, therefore, art became a vehicle to spread communist propaganda. Drama became a vehicle to spread communist propaganda, and cinema became the same. K. Abbas, he was a card carrying communist party member.
Oh, he was a member.
Yeah, Balraj Sahani.
He
So
was-
there is a huge list out
He
there.
was a commie.
Yeah, he was a total commie.
Okay.
Utpal Dutt was a
Ah,
card carrying member of the Communist Party. So a lot of these guys came, and they thought, while they were spreading communist propaganda, some of them also thought that they were building a new India.
Genuinely thought.
Genuinely thought.
Okay.
So these were hardcore guys. Some of them, they lived and died in utter poverty. Also, they could, uplift the masses through their uh, passionate dialogues and their riveting screenplays and things like that. So, as that was happening on one side, another stream was also developing. This was the influence of what is known as the Nawabi Urdu culture, which back then had spread, was flourishing more or less in places like Lahore, Karachi, Lucknow, all these hubs of so-called Muslim culture or the Nawabi culture. So that there's this new movie, or web series called Hira Mandi.
Yes.
Yeah. So what does it talk about? It's the same thing. It in a way it celebrates that decadence of that Tawaif and the Kotha culture. Basically, that's what it is.
Celebration of decadence. Nawabi culture, while source was Lahore, Karachi.
Not source. I mean, they were spread across. They were dominant in these areas.
Okay. And okay, you'll anyway cover how did it come into Mumbai then?
So people, many artists, and even technical crew, like I said, lyric writers, poets, all those fellows, music directors, all those guys. So they saw this new fledgling medium, cinema, as an opportunity to showcase their own talent in whatever ways. Right. So there is no linear, there's no starting point A and then that goes up to X or something. So all these things were happening simultaneously, and there were various influences that informed their filmmaking, their writing and screenplays and the rest of it. So the leftist movement, the communist movement was one such powerful influence, and this Nawabi movement was another powerful influence in Hindi cinema. So like I said, these formative years of Hindi cinema were shaped by all these influences: communism, progressivism, socialism, whole Nawabi culture. So they all started, there's a huge influx into this film industry populated by all such people. Now, the notable part, rather the most notable part about, not just about the individual movies that were made, but most notable part is the language and the overall tenor and the atmosphere of these movies that, that have been created in these movies. So language, for example, that is not Hindi. That is not Hindi. It is a bizarre mix of an artificial language known as Urdu, all right, which did not exist, I think, even 300 years ago. Okay, added to that mix was another artificial language known as Hindustani, which was Mohandas Gandhi's invention.
Hindustani?
Yeah, Hindustani.
Okay.
So that was a alleged mix of Farsi, Hindi and Urdu and Sanskrit also to some extent. This played a very, very, very important role. Now, once this language became mainstream, the dialogues, we'll come to that in a future episode. Plus, what was the cultural background of all these writers and others? One, of course, the communism, the Urdu thing was there. They came from a wide variety of backgrounds. especially after the partition of India, there was an influx, there was a large scale migration of different writers, even costumers, darzis jo bolte hain, costume makers, artists, poets from the dregs of society in Lahore, Karachi, Rawalpindi, and other places. They came from the absolute gutters, and there are many examples to substantiate this, but we are going to digress if I give those examples. So this many of them would be absolute illiterates, not the writers, of course, but the ancillary technical team. So given all this, right from the beginning, the predominance of this Islamic culture informed, shaped, and kind of contributed to a great extent to the evolution of Hindi cinema. Now, some of the themes of early Hindi movies were Alam Ara. So that movie was it talks about the main theme of the movie is set in some daughter of some historical romance set in the Mughal kingdom. Then, of course, you have this blockbuster called Mughal Azam.
Yeah, I don't know why it's called a blockbuster.
It was a blockbuster, by the way.
I know.
Songs are beautiful. Music is phenomenal. But what does it show? What does Mughal Azam show really? The decadent Mughal culture, the court life, the so-called immortal romance between Jahangir and Anarkali. Who was this Anarkali? She was the concubine of his own father Akbar, and he was bedding her, and Akbar found it out and obviously was enraged. So if Anarkali was a concubine of your own father, and you're sleeping with her, what does it mean?
Absolutely.
You can't say that in a polite language. So what does it mean? And that is celebrated as an immortal romance. How?
So if I may ask, so there is no historical basis for you called out the facts right now, concubine versus this, and it is absolutely, like you said, some words can't be used. So this is just the creation of the writer which became a film and which became popular, is it? This whole thing?
No, there was posthumously after this whole Anarkali episode happened, and she was buried alive in the wall. After that, some of these shayars and poets and other fiction writers, they recast this Salim and Anarkali story as a romance.
Okay.
To
so it was retro package.
To whitewash, the perverse reality, the vulgar reality that story conveys.
Okay. So it's a whitewash.
Whitewash. Mughal Azam is there. Then there are several Salim Anarkalis which came. There's a movie called Anarkali itself. Yeah. Beautiful songs again. Then there is a Salim Anarkali in Telugu.
Is that so?
Yeah. Okay. So this look at the enduring legacy of such stories. But and look at what history says. It says the opposite. In fact, it's a perversion of history. So this was the kind of themes that they dealt with in those days. And then you have Pakiza. What the hell is that, yaar? 4 hours, I think, 3+ hours of torture. So what is that? And they celebrate it as some kind of everlasting love and pure love. And there is nothing there in Pakiza and these movies apart from the visuals and songs. Songs are really good. They had nailed it. This was par for the course. How else do you think, with such a story of this kind of evolution, how else do you think its future trajectory would turn out? I'll come to that in a bit.
So, what again, I think is a question that bothers us even today. It again goes back to the audience. Why were they lapping all this up? I mean, lack of knowledge?
This is a fantastic question, Parag. Straightforward answer, one-line answer. These movies became big blockbusters because A, they were extremely well made.
Okay.
The craft was, outstanding, truly. And remember that they had no precedent to, no past masters to follow. So they had to do everything from the scratch, innovate from the scratch, think of newer methods of screenplay writing, storytelling. So they had to do everything on their own. So when in times of scarcity, in times of adversity, you give your best.
Okay.
In times of lot of constraints, you give your best.
To share cinematic experience.
That was good. Point number 1. Point number 2, both to filmmakers and to the Indian audiences, cinema was a very, 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 very new medium. Contrast it with drama in an age where there were no mics. So, voice culture, the art of delivering dialogues in a loud voice, was mandatory because your voice had to be
Heard by the
heard
last
till the
person.
last
Yeah.
row, right? So, cinema changed all that, and there is no scope. It is rather impossible to do a close up in a stage drama. So now you have this big screen, emoting, weeping, laughing, doing all this. If that hits you at such close ups, this new audience, the audience in that period, which had never experienced something like this before, in a darkened hall with hundreds of
So,
other
in a
people,
sense, because it was new and there was a
it
complete
would
noise.
hit them
Okay.
like nothing had ever done before. That is
Second.
point two. Point number three, and this is the most important. That audience was a gullible audience. While these people were trying to, peddle social justice and socialism and communism and eradication of poverty and utopia and equality, the gullible audience was enjoying a story. They wept with them, they cried with them, they laughed with them, they clapped. This whole concept of hooting and whistling and throwing coins, it happens nowhere in the world except in India.
And in some states which are
Everywhere, Tamil Nadu,
yeah,
Kerala, Karnataka, everywhere. Even in Bombay, Mumbai theaters, they used to throw coins and hoot and whistle and yell and all that. Nowhere else in the world you would see this. It was a gullible audience. It was a very innocent audience, very naive audience. So to them, Satya Harischandra is the same,
as
gives you the
as
same kind of
Mughalism.
enjoyment. They go and watch movies for the same thing, to get entertained, not to be fed all kinds of toxic ideologies. While those fellows were slowly doing this, using cinema as a medium and a vehicle.
Okay.
So this is what explains the success of all these so-called acclaimed Hindi cinema. In the next episode, we'll examine a few of those so-called cult classics and celebrated Hindi cinema, and expose the subtle messaging, both subtle and even pronounced messaging that they did. Several of Raj Kapoor's movies, just to give a random example to set the context, Wo Subah Kab Aayega, Wo Subah Fir Aayega or something. So that is a direct lift, cinematic adaptation of a communist Russian novel. And why was Raj Kapoor's movies allegedly celebrated? Not allegedly, they were celebrated in Russia because Russia was ruled by communists, and Nehru was a die-hard communist addict. So this nobody tells you. Oh, Raj Kapoor is great because his movies are Russian celebrities movies.
Global popularity.
This kind of nonsense. What they don't tell you is this concealed, barely concealed, incestuous relationship that people like Raj Kapoor had with the Nehru Khandan. This is when this kind of propaganda began. Now, to give credit to Raj Kapoor, although he did these kinds of movies, he was culturally rooted. He knew how to project our festivals on the screen. He knew how to use our cultural idioms uh, 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 in his scenes, in his dialogues, in his story. That was all there. That's what made his movies appealing at some level. All right, but he also had this kind of a thing. But we'll come to that in a future episode. So this is how Bollywood evolved as a toxic combination of communist ideology and Islamic themes. To put it broadly, of course, there were mindless entertainers like Sita or Gita. This kind of mindless, all those string of Shami Kapoor films and rest of those guys, romances with people like Shashi Kapoor, Dilip Kumar, rustic stories. They were all part of it. But what you see progressively with each decade of the evolution of Hindi cinema is the minimal presence of movies based on our Bharatiya themes, or what is generally known as Hindu themes. In all its years, in almost a century of Hindi cinema's existence, why has not a single Hindi movie celebrating the life of Maharana Pratap or Chhatrapati Shivaji? It's only now, this Chava has come, but that's about Sambhaji.
Sambhaji.
Yeah, who was, who can no way be compared to his more illustrious father. Okay, Shivaji was the real deal. In 100 years, why no movie on Maharana Pratap, Chhatrapati Shivaji, Jaitra Simha, Bappa Rawal? Why? Why?
Again, it goes back to
It
the
goes
series we
back.
did with
It goes
history.
back with this because almost from the beginning, this whole Nawabi culture began to dominate Hindi cinema. So this, unless you place this in this broad historical context, and I'm being deliberate and rather building this up slowly, so you get a complete historical context to why Bollywood has become what it has become today. Everything else apart from entertainment and art, forget art तो छोड़ ही दो आप,
Yeah, art तो नहीं है.
छोड़ ही दो आप.
Hmm.
तो ये होता है. This is how, this is what really explains. Then especially after sometime in the late 40s, throughout the 60s and 70s, you had these communist capture not only of education and other institutions but of drama and cinema, who transformed cinema as a political ideological movement. So like I said, you had IPTA, Indian Progressive
Yeah.
Theatre Association. Then you had the Progressive Writers Association. Most of those guys, you look at 100%, all of those guys were either card carrying members of the Communist Party or their loyalists, and most majority of them were Islamists. You give me a list of acclaimed lyric writers in Bollywood. Sahir Ludhianvi, Majrooh Sultanpuri.
Sultanpuri, correct.
Check that out.
Yes, yes.
There's a whole
And I think
list.
that is why the lyrics that we grew up with
Exactly.
had that whole
Yeah.
alien
So
language
there
flavor.
is a song, I don't remember the name of the lyric writer. It basically says, right right off the bat, it says, पत्थर के सनम
तुझे हमने खुदा
तुझे
माना.
हमने खुदा माना.
Correct. Manoj Kumar.
पत्थर के सनम, what do you mean पत्थर के सनम, sir? तुझे हमने, there is पत्थर and there is खुदा, stone god,
Yeah.
Butt,
Buddha.
idol worship. These things, although the song is very beautiful,
Yeah, it is.
music is great. So, but the point is, these lyrics, when you sing them, they play a very subtle impact in your psyche about the way you think. मैं काफिर तो नहीं मगर ए हसीन, जब से देखा मैंने तुझको बंदगी आ गई. What does all these things mean, sir? So they play a very, very subtle influence. They have a nuanced impact on our psyche as we consume it. We think we are being entertained. No. Yes, we are being entertained,
But
but
what is slipped in is
something else is also happening. So these are highly intangible things that you cannot logically explain, but they will show themselves in the outcome. All right.
true.
And they will shape entire generations, and therefore they will also inform the changes occurring in the society. Among all audiovisual mediums, cinema is the most powerful, and those leftist fellows and the rest of that peaceful lobby, they understood it like nobody else did.
You know, the fact that you said it is a gullible audience and for prolonged decades, and if I correlate it with the deep, long series we did on how Marxists destroyed Indian education, I see a correlation because there was no appetite for any fact check happening on how these subtle things are fed. In the sense, the audience was gullible also because of the way whatever they learned wasn't really accurate. So whatever is shown on the screen in the form of entertainment stayed in the psyche because there was no real history available with them on what exactly it was. For example, the way you called out Mughal-e-Azam for what it is, it was perversion, right? I mean, but it was glorified as a romance of the century or of the. So I think both these two perhaps played a role. They all happened parallelly, is the way I see it.
Yeah, they happened simultaneously. Yes. So there was no large cabal sitting in one room and making these decisions.
Yeah, that I get.
So this part of the growth of their spread and
it is organic.
growth of their ideology and their propaganda. So that is, these are two, like I said, these are highly intangible things which can only be analyzed in hindsight.
Correct.
So these are some of the key influences that shaped Hindi cinema from its beginning days. Now there is another reason for the proliferation of this Nawabi and this communist culture in Hindi cinema. That reason is historical. For centuries, northern India was ravaged and by repeated Islamic invasions, plus a long spell of Islamic rule. So, under such an oppressive tyranny, which was actually a bigoted rule, they were all bigoted regimes, which new art based on our traditional themes can evolve?
Okay. So there is a point there.
Why have Puranikas, why have movies made on traditional Puranic themes and stories from Ramayana and Mahabharata? Why has that become a brilliant genre in say Telugu, Kannada, and to an extent Tamil?
Yeah, you
Why?
absolutely.
Yeah, why have they why have they flourished here and not in Bombay, in Bombay film industry, in Hindi film
Yeah,
industry?
yeah.
Because of the same history, because of something called the Vijayanagara Empire, which protected the all the pristine and original elements of Hindu culture, society, its art, literature, theatre, and social structures.
True, true. Well
So
said. Yeah.
this is the reason. This is a main reason why, for example, you forget Shivaji, you forget Maharana Pratap. Why, for example, has a full-length Mahabharata movie made till date in Hindi? There is a Sampurna Ramayanam in Hindi. Thank God for that. A very old movie, 40s or 50s. So, but that's about it. Out here in Telugu, for example, you have series of Ramanjana Yuddha, Krishna Arjuna Yuddha, these things. War between Rama and Hanuman. It's a beautiful innovation. It doesn't exist in Ramayana. Krishna Arjuna Yuddha, imaginary war between Krishna and Arjuna.
But they're at least within the realm of what
yeah,
is.
you lapped up because you had this solid grounding in tradition
Correct.
in these Puranic repositories. You never see that there because of this historical reason as well, and everything that followed, uh, uh, after the partition of India.
Sorry, if I can just go back to your part about gullible again. I think I brought it up. I think another thought could be the gullible part came in from. See, if you look at the receptivity of the movie Chhava today, if Chhava was released then, the times you're talking about, Mughal Azam time, I don't think it would have worked. So I think the audience is no longer gullible also because of facts emerging in the public space, right? And people are receptive. I see a correlation. I don't think this movie would have worked, say, 20 to 30 years back.
I think it would have.
It would have?
I think it would have.
Okay.
The fact that it was not made 20 or 30 years or even 40 years back is simply because of the stranglehold that these fellows had.
Yeah.
No producer
Not necessarily. I think it may not have a bearing on the audience.
No producer would dare to invest money in making such a movie.
Okay.
The crew, the technicians, they would simply refuse to work.
So, which brings me to a question we'll save for our next conversation.
So
the refusal was a tool that many others that we will talk about could have used as well.
Yeah, so this is a reality. Not that they wouldn't have worked.
I mean, I saw a correlation.
Not that they would have worked. Not that they wouldn't have worked.
It remains to be seen. It may not be that reason alone.
As simple as that. See, I mentioned Dr. Kothas in China. Nowhere does that movie show that India's humiliation at the hands of China was produced, scripted, written and directed by Nawab Nehru. It only shows the aftermath of the war. Soldiers, Indian patriotic soldiers wounded and dying, saved by this kindly doctor. You dare to have the guts to show till today, sir, two major themes. You forget historical themes. You forget Shivaji. You forget Krishnadevaraya. Contemporary, near contemporary events, partition of India. Why has not a single truthful movie about the partition of India have come? All those movies that have come, Garam Hawa, which is a train to Pakistan, Tamas, all these movies, they are absolute disasters. They are dishonest movies about the partition of India. Why has no single movie till date come about the role of Nawab Nehru in the 1962 invasion of
absolutely.
China?
Debacle was squarely at his feet. Yeah.
Right. Why? Till date. All right. So these are threads. See how all these connections, work, and their roots and their rather prolonged history. How they work. With this background, I think the stage is set for us to explore what is known as Bollywood even further.
Thank you all for joining us and listening to Dharma Podcast with Sandeep Balakrishna. The conversation you just heard is the beginning of what promises to be a journey into the realms of Indian cinema. And Sandeep has set the stage for getting into Bollywood in the subsequent conversations. I think it's important that this series will bring to light several aspects of how it has impacted the Indian society at large. But I think a fair amount of impact that the Bollywood has done, this series would promise to unravel. So we look forward to you continuing to listen to this series as we go along the journey with Sandeep. Please like, share, and subscribe to Dharma Podcast. Also, support it in any which way you can so that the content reaches a wider audience and more such content can be made. And also, subscribe to some of the exclusive content that we've started putting out on this channel. And I'm sure you'll find that relevant and useful. So, thank you all for listening to us, and we shall be back again to continue talking about the Bollywood.